Alex Morozov, and I started ETP News a few months ago. As some of you may know, I'm an oncologist and spent my career in the pharmaceutical industry, worked on over 200 clinical trials and a dozen of new cancer therapies. And then 3 years ago, I decided to write a book about what I do, clinical trials, and more broadly, the concept of evidence, what it is, how to use it to make better medical decisions. And it became such a passion that I left my day job and started Vivo Partners, a nonprofit focusing on the public and helping the public to make better medical decisions, and ETP News, evidence to the people. And we at ETP News, we are engaging with subject matter experts to dig deep into untold stories. And also, as subject matter experts, hopefully we have a crystal ball, and we will talk about that a little bit later to help us think about where the next the trends are and where the next big stories might be. Today we have a very important topic that's on the minds of a lot of people: wellness. We have many people who registered for this live event, and thank you to those who are submitting your questions. And so we'll talk for some time, and then would love to really address the questions from the audience. So please submit them as comments in the chat. And today we have a very special guest, Paul Schulick, a master herbalist and serial entrepreneur. And for those of you who don't know him, he's one of the most highly respected thought leaders in the natural industry, and has profound insights to share on business success through connection, corporate vision, based on honesty, generosity, self-reflection, a genuine sense of gratitude. He has thought a lot about transparency, such as in this industry, supply chain transparency becomes really important. So with his wife Barbi, he founded the iconic supplement company New Chapter, which was acquired by Procter & Gamble in 2012. This was just one of the examples of how, Paul, you anticipated trends before they manifested and introduced revolutionary innovation that changed the natural product industry. He's a master herbalist, trained under the direction of Dr. John Christopher at the School of Natural Healing. And Paul formulated and launched several innovations that quickly rose to the #1 selling rank in categories including prenatal vitamins, men's vitamins, women's vitamins, herbal formulations, herbal singles, mushrooms, calcium, etc., elevating New Chapter to the #1 brand in the natural product industry. He's an author of 4 books. And several years ago, the Schulicks announced that they were launching a new wellness company for the Biome, and I'm sure there were many insights and lessons there that Paul can share. So please join me in welcoming Paul. And Paul, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have you as a guest.
Thank you, Alex. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate all the people that are listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Perhaps to start, what a fascinating journey it has been for you, and would love for you to share more about how you started, what inspired your interest in herbal medicine, and how things progressed from there.
Thank you, Alex. The story always comes out a little bit different each time, but I think when I think about the very beginning of my desire to be in the healing profession. I think of my father. He was a pediatrician, and I think of going on my first house call with him when I was a toddler, basically. And I remembered he wouldn't bring me into the house. I would go back to the car. But my dad, being a pediatrician, was at that time was making house calls, sometimes 2 or 3 in a night, and kind of amazing when you think about it these days of what that was like. And so I remembered the feeling that when Dad would come into the house, watching the parents, the look in their eyes, and this wonderful, he was just a wonderful human being and also a good doctor. And so I was deeply influenced by that, and I wanted to be like him. So I was pre-med in college, and I think some of it was because of the proliferation when I was young of taking antibiotics. My dad had me on tetracycline, and my teeth all turned yellow, and not to mention I was running behind DDT trucks, and there was just a plethora of issues that were. So by the time in 1972, 73, I was in college, and I was pre-med, but I just felt I was taking the medicines, but they weren't helping. So back then it was the herbal medicine that I could try, and lo and behold, I started feeling a little bit better. Modern medicine had done the best that they could for my father with pancreatic cancer. And I came in after spending, I've been studying herbs for a few years at that point in 1980. And I said, Dad, I could bring together some herbs that would make you feel more comfortable, maybe. And Dad said, well, I'll do it, but you have to get the blessings of the oncologist. My dad was a doctor, so he was part of that tradition and believed very strongly that he should have their blessings, and that was fine. So I made the appointment, and the appointment lasted, it was scheduled for an hour. The appointment lasted 5 minutes, and the oncologist said, you're making a very big mistake. You should go home, hold your dad's hand, and help him die. If there was anything of value here, I would know about it. So, and you know what, Alex? There's a growing trend right now over these last, since 1980, so 45, 50 years. There's been a growing trend of acceptance in the United States, but still, in so many areas, there's still a lot of room for growth. So, from my perception, that was a major driver that made me feel like a contribution I could make with my life would be to bring herbal medicine to a larger community. So that started in my health food store, and then by 1986, I basically felt like I could make contributions, that I was making herbal extracts for people, and starting in 1982. And so I made extracts and started a company called New Chapter. And I did that from 1982 to 2012, sold the company. I didn't really want to sell New Chapter. I was happy to keep going, but I had a lot of partners, and they wanted to sell. They thought that we had reached the peak of our success. I knew that we were just getting started. And I still believe, Alex, that herbal medicine is just in its nascent phases here in the United States. And I think we have to embrace a larger story, because our healthcare system in the United States is definitely in very unhealthy shape, as you know as well or better than anybody else. We're ranked 49th in the world in healthy life expectancy, and we spend $4.5 trillion for that. Number 1 in the world in expense, number 49 in our health. So that's you don't need a degree in business to know that doesn't work. So you look at the top 3 countries or 4 countries in the world, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, they all embrace complementary medicine. They all embrace herbal medicine. So in Japan, it's very common. 2 out of 3 doctors are recommending herbal medicine to their patients. So I wrote a book on ginger in 1994, and I interviewed a researcher from Denmark, Dr. Shrivastava, who had done one of the first clinical trials on ginger and its anti-inflammatory effect. And he had some of the most remarkable results in his small clinical trial, where people who had rheumatoid arthritis were having no relief from gold salts, methotrexate, corticosteroids, and lo and behold, a half a teaspoon of ginger a day had a phenomenal effect. 60 or 70% of people had marked relief from their rheumatoid arthritis. So, it's a small trial, but why wouldn't there be many, many trials? And why wouldn't we understand what the mechanisms are behind that? So that has really inspired me over the years, and to make whatever contribution I can to people's health in the United States and mirror these other countries in the world.
No, this is so important, and in the process of working on the chapter about indigenous medicine, for my book, I came to to a very, maybe in hindsight, a very simple realization. If we wonder where is our indigenous medicine here in the West, and why don't we have doctors prescribing it, unlike in Asia? Well, because it was destroyed. A lot of this traditional knowledge was destroyed by colonialism, and so essentially you're rebuilding this knowledge in a way that in Asia they were able to preserve it. Can you talk about, since we have many sort of technical people here on LinkedIn, and drug developers, and what was the innovation when you talk about extracts? What was the innovative approach that you developed?
Okay, so it's a great question. I would say that one of the earliest successes for what I did was realizing that you don't really know, when you take an herb, you don't know what's in that herb from one batch to the other. That's one of the good rationales of the modern pharmacopoeia approach. So one of the first drugs, obviously, was salicylic acid from meadowsweet, and from that, aspirin was basically developed. So you just never knew, if you were to take meadowsweet, you wouldn't know how much of the salicylic acid was in there. And so it would make sense that you would want to isolate it or to purify it. So one of the innovations that I started was what I referred to as potency assurance. So that when you take our ginger, and I don't work in New Chapter anymore, so I don't know what they do. But when I was there, we would take our ginger and we would measure the gingerols and the shogols. We would take our turmeric, we'd measure the curcuminoids, and we'd measure the turmerones, and we would have a range. So, because it's never exactly the same. So we would assure people that we give the full spectrum of the turmeric compounds, for example, or the ginger compounds, or whatever herb I'm working with. You give the full spectrum, and then you promise that you will have at least this amount of curcumin, or you'll have this least amount of EGCG, if it's green tea, or whatever it is you have. and so-called active. But then you have this congregation or symphony of other compounds. And I don't believe that nature puts all those other compounds in for no reason. Or when you mention indigenous medicine, there's great wisdom in the way the Native Americans would harvest their plants. They knew when the peak periods were. So they had great wisdom behind that. So, and they knew that there was a reason. They had a deep faith in the whole plant. I used to show this slide. You're an oncologist, right? Mm-hmm. So you're familiar with a pathway called 5-lipoxygenase, right? 5-lipoxygenase, cyclooxygenase 2. Mm-hmm. 5-lipoxygenase is one of these enzyme systems that drives cancer cell growth. Mm-hmm. So I would show a slide of all the components in ginger that would conceivably inhibit this enzyme system called 5-lipoxygenase. And it wasn't just 6-gingerol. It was all these other compounds. And you find that one of the earliest studies that I discovered was that when I used to make ginger extracts, I would sometimes make it from fresh juice. You can see how obsessive I am, Alex. This is what happens. So you have ginger juice, and when you measure its antioxidative activity, it's negligible. When you measure the antioxidant activity of the spicy extract that doesn't precipitate, very high. So let's get, I don't remember the exact number, say it's 30 as an antioxidant. The precipitate's near 0, and the antioxidant fraction is more than 30. But combine the two of them together, and you more than double that activity. So potency assurance, to me, was delivering an active compound in the context of the whole plant. That was a very, very important part. The other piece was when you extract a plant, the most common method of extraction when I started that was available, there wasn't that big an industry back in 1980, very few companies, just a handful. Mm-hmm. But the extracts were all often being extracted with alcohol and or high heat, and a combination of the two. So that can alter the delicate structure of the plants. So I found a company in Germany that was manufacturing extracts that were made what's referred to as supercritically, so that they would not use it very low heat, but they would use pressure that would not alter the structure of the plant. And so that was a real innovation from my perspective. The combination of supercritical extraction along with the assurance that we're going to give you a range. And in Germany, they had the technology to measure these compounds back in the late 80s, early 90s. So those were the major innovations.
That's incredible, and this perhaps leads me to a question as a world expert in this area. What advice would you give to consumers? Because if someone probably walks into a health food store today, not every supplement that's on the shelf will be developed with the same rigor that you're describing. Are there certain things that we as consumers should look out for?
It's a great question. And I'm absolutely amazed at the challenge that a consumer faces
as they navigate this field. I am a professional label reader. I've done this for a living. So what I could do is I could show you, if you give me 1 second.
Yes, please.
I have no affiliation, by the way, with any of these companies. So and again, I think that's important because one of the trends that I'm not that crazy about is, how do you know how to trust your sourcing, and the information, the stuff that you're filling your head with. So I don't have. This is just I use these. I would use these products. So and the herb that I'm talking about now is a very well-known anti-inflammatory herb. And to me, the two things that are the most important to address from a holistic perspective, and you know this obviously very well, is inflammation and stress, your anxiety levels, or whatever you want to call it. So, you're familiar with the term inflammaging.
Yes.
So the more we can manage inflammation, healthy inflammation in our bodies, the healthier we'll be. So one of the herbs that I am most interested in, especially recently, is Boswellia. It's particularly been studied for radio protection, protecting the brain from radiation treatment. And Boswellia has these compounds in the, again, I'll show you, I'm trying to get the right spot.
Oh, yeah, this is perfect.
And then if we turn it this way, it's the opposite of what my mind is.
Supplement facts, yes.
You'll see 60% boswellic acids. Now that 60% boswellic acids would be a terminology that would tell you this is a measured product that's going to deliver or should try to deliver a consistent quality of product. Now, I haven't studied this part of it, how many different boswellic acids there are. Maybe you know that. I haven't Googled that recently. But there's a number of boswellic acids, of which one of them is this compound called AKBA, AKBA. Have you already lectured people on this?
No. Okay. This is fascinating, yeah.
So AKBA is to boswellia what curcumin is to turmeric. Curcumin is only one of a couple hundred compounds in turmeric. But it's biologically very active. But it depends to a great extent, on your microbiome. It needs to interact with your gut bacteria in order to work. So here is another Boswellia product. And this one has AKBA in it. Okay? And if you look at the label, this might be hard because it's going the opposite direction. You'll see that it has 20, you wouldn't have seen this unless you have great vision, 30% AKBA. So this AKBA has been the product that has been clinically studied. Then lastly, and this just shows you how crazy it all is, right? Here's another product that's manufactured by the same company that manufactures the extract here. But this extract is an advanced delivery system of AKBA over this one. So now I am a researcher, if anything, herbal researcher. I can navigate pretty well through this stuff. A consumer, forget it. They don't even know where to start with it. So for the consumer, back to your original question, Alex, it's very challenging for a consumer to know, but the least thing they should have before you start taking a product is you need to, some of these products that are in the market today, they won't list the actives that are in the product, or they won't tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
I would insist on calling the company and ask them, what are the actives?
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, you know this. What percent of our drugs today were at once derived from herbs? This is basically wherever the drug companies find that there's value, they'll extract these compounds, but they don't. Sometimes they're mostly, unfortunately, motivated by money. They're not necessarily motivated by healing people. And that's a part of the reason why one of your early questions to me in one of our correspondences, what is the reason for this trend? Why is herbal medicine becoming more popular? It's because people don't trust the intentions of a lot of these larger industries, because their primary motivation is often profit. And that is, to me, one of the most important drivers from my life. Although we became successful financially, for me, that was never the driver. The driver was to help people. And so does that answer your question?
Yes, that is very helpful. And I was just looking. So ACBA is an acronym for a chemical name, right? Acetyl keto beta busylic acid. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. So it's going kind of from the all of the acid mixture and the ingredients to just one chemical to then an encapsulated delivery system for that chemical.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. So if you're just buying, a bottle that says, rosemary on it, or
exactly.
that is not very specific.
Well, and even I drink teas every day,
mm-hmm.
and if my life depended on it, I want to know what's in those teas. I
Yes.
want to, and at this point in my life, with my experience, I can often tell when I'm drinking an herb how good it is.
Mm.
A consumer may not know that. I'm not, Alex, at the level that some herbalists, like traditional herbalists, like would hold a ginseng plant, and they would know whether it was a wild plant or a cultivated plant, and they could close their eyes and feel that. So whether or not you believe that or not, you can get very sensitive to how these plants work.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's sort of like wine tasting, right? There's some connoisseurs.
That's a perfect example.
So you mentioned something that I wanted to follow up on in terms of the rising popularity of herbal medicine, and you mentioned this one driver of trust. What are some of the other reasons you think for this growing popularity?
I think people, besides trusting, I think people, as their health deteriorates, and as the average caseload of a general practitioner, I think, is reaching 2,000, 2,500 people. I see the smile. I mean, it's staggering how anybody could possibly shoulder that kind of a burden. So consumers are starting to realize, I better take care of myself. I'm going to need to take care of myself. And that's the way, historically, I mean, still 70-80% of the world is relying on herbal medicine to take care of themselves. I should mention this also, that I heard a story, and I don't have verification of it anymore, but I heard a story years ago that in China, you couldn't visit your doctor unless you had some proof that you had done your Tai Chi or Qigong beforehand. Because they knew, it's like, what good is it if you're just going to do the same stuff that's leading to your dis-ease? So it's just all part of this the system that I think is so in need of an overhaul. And consumers are sensing, not only is there greed, unfortunately, on one side, their prescription drugs get more and more expensive. The doctors are getting harder and harder to get in touch with. They're feeling sick, and they want something that's going to make them feel better. And so the indigenous medicines are their only choice at some point. So I think that has become a major driver for people, is that they really are up against a wall right now in terms of health. And I think they sense. I wrote a paper that people can download on a website called Herbal Reality for a healthier America: kindness, humor, and tea. I chose one herb out of 1,000 herbs that would be worthy of consideration. Just drinking green tea every day, Alex, modifies numerous systems in the body. And people I get emails like this. People say, I can't believe it. I have some berries. I recommend bilberries, and I recommend black currants. And I recommend doing this practice where you have one hand on your heart, one hand on your gut. Holistic herbalism, looking at the person as a whole. And people start noticing a difference. I recommended to my cousin the other day who was having chronic lung issues. I recommend that she do some breath work. It's absolutely amazing that these very simple interventions can save people's lives. And so people are resorting back to some of these simpler, free medicines. And I think that it's what has to happen as we are moving along.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And continuing on that thread and the future, and you showed me your actual crystal ball that you
Yes.
that you have, which, as I mentioned, coming from you, I take very seriously. That it might actually work in your case.
Yes.
Where do you see this? What does the future hold in this field?
So we're definitely at an inflection point, because the political environment is just so incendiary. It is just and there's such a lack of kindness and compassion in the national and international dialogue now, with wars, and it's just so we're at an inflection point, and there's certain things that are embraced, like minimizing ultra processed foods and keeping preservatives and colorings at a minimum. I mean, how do you argue with that? I mean, it's of course you want whole food and you don't want colors in your food. So I'm all on that. Now, whether or not we should all be drinking raw milk or eating lots of meat, even if it's, I don't believe that or feel that, but there's some good things that I would tease out of that. But the big area that I think is open is this idea that, and if it gains traction, to tell people, and we make trends, Alex. See, this is the point. You can make a trend. If you tell a story well enough, the trend starts with that. So, and I've been a little bit of a trendsetter. So if you tell a good story can start to spread. Well, a really good story that I was familiar with when I first started my business, the first product I made, one of the first products in 1982 was a probiotic product called All Flora. And it's changed over the years, but I have always believed, because my life depended on it. You remember I mentioned earlier I had digestive issues. It was when my dad recommended that I take this early prescription probiotic called, I think it was called Based. It basically saved me. I was having a horrible reaction to an antibiotic, and when I was a kid, and so I think that I've always been attracted to probiotics, and we see that the signature of each person's digestive system and their microbiome. So I think the whole microbiome trend is an important one.
Mm-hmm.
And how we feed that. We're all, in some ways, we can look at ourselves as walking compost heaps. We're all like walking around with these trillions of bacteria, at least as many, if not more, than human cells. And then genetically, there's just a lot more going on there. And that doesn't even embrace what's referred to as the virome, the whole viral community. So you've got all this stuff going on that's way beyond our comprehension for the most part, but we're just beginning the science on that. I think the more people start feeding their intestinal flora with these rich rainbows, as they've said, of compounds, colors of compounds, they'll start noticing fairly dramatic, like within a couple of weeks, people can notice they start feeling a little bit better when they start modifying their microbiome. I looked at trends recently, actually, that are popular. And one of the trends that's popular is these wearables. I'm not a big fan of the wearables. For me, they activate whatever obsessive compulsive behavior I have inherently within me. I just start wondering, well, does this work? Does this? I lose all my. It's like in that Star Wars scene where Yoda, I think it was, telling Luke Skywalker to turn off the radar and just rely on his. You remember that scene?
Yes. Yes.
So you gotta turn off the equipment and rely on your inner sense. I showed you at the beginning, Albert Schweitzer over here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can see.
Carries her or his own doctor inside. I believe in that inner wisdom. And I also believe in the Arapaho proverb. And again, you triggered a thought from me, Alex, on indigenous medicine. How the Arapaho would say that plants are our brothers and sisters. All we need to do, or something like this, is to listen. They can speak. And that is the way some drugs were developed. They apparently, they didn't know this, or the natives, the indigenous people, would put an herb on their heart, and they would ask in their dream state, what is this herb going to do? And I know it sounds fantastic, but they would get a message. Well, it turns out sometimes that message was clear, and drug companies, that's how I believe it was when Christine and vinblastine were developed. So, I just think that trend of the microbiome is one that's going to be listened to, and I think the whole notion of wearable devices, I think there's a place for those kinds of things, but I think they're limited, and I think people are going to need to rely more on their internal senses. So I like this idea of basically looking at getting consumers to be more aware of what they're actually taking, because still that is not prevalent.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Your story also prompted me to ask, to go back to your your early days, building a new chapter, and and I was sort of comparing your experience to the experience of a drug developer, either in a university or in a pharmaceutical company, in the sense that you actually saw your customers coming in and telling you how they're feeling, and coming in and telling you this worked for them or this did not work for them, so it becomes a cycle. How much has that influenced your sort of how your products evolved? Was that sort of this back and forth with your customers?
Huge.
Yeah.
It was a core piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just as one example, I liked the idea back in the early 80s. I liked the idea of super nutrition, or it was Richard Passwater, one of these early influencers, who suggested that and Linus Pauling in a way too, if you just take huge amounts of these vitamins, they would make a difference. So I was dosing myself with 10 grams a day of ascorbic acid and taking, 2,000 IU of tocopherols, and I felt worse. But they made it sound so good. So I said, well, maybe it's just me, maybe because I'm delicate or my system is sensitive or whatever. So then I'd try it on 2 or 3, 5, 10 people, and all, the majority of the people had the same experience I had. Quite frankly, Alex, it was like that with vitamins. It was with most of the vitamins that people didn't feel better with the vitamins. Mm-hmm. People, for the most part, felt better when they would use the herbs. So that's why I was more interested in the herbs. But one of the innovations that I did do with vitamins was lower the potency and increase their bioavailability through fermentation. And that generally got very, very positive response. And was one of the reasons why we became so popular. Was because we started delivering vitamins in a more bioavailable form.
Yeah, this is fascinating because I think for many people, herbal medicine and innovation people don't associate those two concepts, but here you're living proof that this is so far from the truth. There's actually a lot of innovation that's needed.
Well, see, and right now, Alex, there's I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of companies that are out there. If you go on Amazon, you just, wow, it's like there's so many different choices. And I just don't, I think innovation is, most of these companies are doing just exactly the same thing with a different label. And to me, that's just it's a waste of packaging and confusing to the consumer. I don't even know if Baskin Robbins is still in business, the ice cream company.
Yes.
They're still in business?
Definitely. There's one a couple of blocks from here, yes.
Oh, yes. Great. Okay, so when I used to go into a Baskin Robbins, I'd be overwhelmed. All I would want is just either the coffee or the vanilla or the strawberry. But, the choices are enough sometimes to drive people crazy. So sometimes it's the simple, this is going to work, and innovation has to be a true innovation. And to me, potency assurance is just like so fundamental.
Yes.
And so I don't think I was particularly brilliant to figure that piece out. It's just like, as a consumer, I just want to know what's in my product, and especially if my life depends on it.
Yes, no, absolutely. And just one thing that caught my attention. You said that you would try the high dose vitamins on 5 to 10 people. So it was like a mini clinical trial that you would do, but you would tell them that this is an experiment, and you would tell them about your experience, right? How would that actually work in practice?
Well, people would come into my health food store, and at that point, Alex, it was 1980. So there was I didn't have a lot of I just had a few people, and so I would always, after the first few people started mirroring the same experience I had, I would say, we just got to take a lower potency. You don't need that much. More is not better, and that's where I ended up landing. So it was a very small but influential trial on myself and on a handful of people. I didn't even know I was. I would say this is what this very well-known doctor is recommending. Maybe it'll work for you. And they would come back and say, no, I had diarrhea. It didn't work for me. So,
interesting. That's fascinating. I wanted to go back to the pictures behind you. You talked about one, but just before we started, you told me about the plant behind you and also your daughter's painting, I think.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So this one over here is one of my favorite plants that almost nobody knows about in the United States, called Cistus incanus. It's also goes by the name rock rose, and it's been widely used in the Mediterranean area, and it's Sardinia, and you can get it online from you can make a tea of it basically, and it's very high in polyphenols, very similar to green tea and polyphenols like EGCG, but the difference is that it does not have caffeine. So for some people like myself, I don't do well particularly with caffeine. So Cistus incanus has been studied, and it has, if you do an online search, you'll see that it has significant impact on the immune system, very positive impact, and so that's been one of my favorite plants to recommend, especially during the infection period. During COVID, there was an interesting study that was done with Cistus incanus. So and compared with respiratory illness with green tea, and it was found to be superior. So it's one of my favorite botanicals to recommend. And you can't see the picture, but my daughter, she does these beautiful drawings. See if I have one here.
I love this. It's almost like we're visiting your office. This is thank you for sharing this.
I'll be right there.
Thank you.
She does these beautiful botanical drawings, and they're cards that one obviously greeting cards that one would send to a friend or someone that they'd like to handwrite a note to. And I was telling you at the beginning that it's been one of the health practices that I have done recently that I felt really brings me in closer connection to people. Just writing a card and sending it has been wonderful. It's much better to get in your mailbox as opposed to bills and catalogs. And nothing like a note from a loved one. So,
yes.
So that's my daughter's. And if you want to visit her website, it's rosieswonders.com, and they're very beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that's such a beautiful thought, and I definitely will take your advice and write some cards. I know it's a lost art. Handwriting is a lost art these days.
Yes, very much so. It lights up a whole different areas of your brain and improves your memory, your cognition, your mood. So try it at night. I do it as one of my cooling down practices at night, along with yoga and other things that allows me to sleep better.
Thank you. Well, we were just saying that 3 hours would have been probably enough, maybe not even enough time to cover everything we could. So perhaps we could do a second, a part 2 at some point in the future and get into some more topics.
I would love to do that, Alex. Thank you.
But thank you so much for your time and for everything you're doing. And I'm feeling certainly energized, and I hope the listeners as well. Thank you so much.
And I apologize to the listeners for the glitch.
No worries. No worries. We'll splice it for the version that will be there. So for those who watch it later, we'll splice it out.
Right.
No worries. Okay. Thank you so much. Great to see you. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye. And stream.